It was 6 a.m. when the stranger pulled into the gas station. He was driving a black Monte Carlo SS. A nice ride, although I had never seen it around these parts before. I'll admit, I was scrolling through cat videos, paying little to no attention when he had pulled in. These days, I mostly sit on my butt, sell smokes and candy bars and lottery tickets. That's about it. The high-tech pump does the rest. Yeah, it's an easy job, but it comes with its share of risks, especially on the graveyard shift. No, this isn't a robbery story, although I wish it was. I've been robbed at gunpoint more times than Madonna sang about you-know-what, but I've never actually been shot. I have killed a man in self-defense, of course, but it's all part of the job. The stranger driving the black Monte Carlo SS wore a dark hoodie. At first glance, he seemed ordinary. He simply filled his tank, and then drove off into the waning darkness of the night. It wasn't until the next customer had arrived about 20 minutes later that I noticed something peculiar. The stranger hadn't actually pumped any gas. Weird, I thought, but not completely out of the ordinary. Maybe the driver was on some stuff and wasn't thinking straight. Wouldn't be the first time. But then it happened again. I'll admit, when the black Monte Carlo SS pulled in about a week later at exactly the same time, I still ignored him. By 6 a.m., I'm pretty much half asleep and ready for bed. I live in rural Colorado, and not much happens here at 6 a.m. When the black Monte Carlo SS pulled in the following week, now 3 weeks in a row, I snapped myself away from the cat videos and I paid closer attention. By now, I was intrigued. What was this driver really up to? I mean, I'll presume that he's a he, wasn't causing me any harm, nor was he stealing anything. But why would somebody pull into a gas station and pretend to pump gas? This made no sense. So this time, I watched him closely. The first thing that I noticed was the size of the driver. He was huge. This was no ordinary man. He stood about 7 feet tall easy, and again he wore a black hoodie. No matter how hard I concentrated, I couldn't seem to get a clear view of him. The stranger seemed more like a shadow than an actual person. I must be losing it, I told myself aloud. The sound of my voice gave me a spook. I watched him put his card inside the machine. He pressed the appropriate buttons on the screen and waited, removed his card and put it in his pocket, released the pump and filled his tank. It took nearly 5 minutes to fill that beast of a car. He shook the nozzle, returned it to its pump and re-entered his vehicle and drove off. When I checked, no gas was actually pumped. I shook my head in disbelief. People sure are getting dumb and dumber these days, Back when I was a boy, these things didn't happen. The moment the stranger sped off, I scurried to the back of the office and pulled up the video and watched it. I zoomed in tight, and right away I knew something was wrong. The driver seemed erroneous. His arms were too long for his body, which was too large for his minuscule head. No wonder he wore a hoodie. His head was quite small in comparison to the rest of him. I zoomed in on his license plate and scribbled down the number, 666 DVL. You've got to be kidding me. Suddenly, I was scared, downright terrified to be honest. I'm all alone in this booth for 8 hours at a time, in the middle of the night, in the depths of nowhere, where the closest cop shop is probably 20 miles west of here. If someone wanted to get at me, they could. Now don't get me wrong, I'm armed to the teeth, but still, this guy was really creepy. I went out to check the pump, and immediately the wind slapped my face. as if to warn me again of such boneheadedness. I shivered. It was brutally cold outside. Standing at the pump, I noticed a thin layer of residue covering the pump handle. It was jet black. Stupidly, I reached out for it and got the stuff all over me. Calling this substance gross is like calling LeBron James a decent actor. It was downright repulsive. I tried rubbing the gunk off my hands, but my efforts were futile. Instead, I ended up smearing the stuff all over my pants, shirt, and jacket. After cursing myself for quite some time, I noticed that the residue was also smudged across the display screen at the pump, and what appeared to be a pentagram. None of this made sense to me. A thin speck of pale white light appeared in the distance. A car. Maybe it's the black Monte Carlo SS, I thought. Maybe the stranger isn't finished with me just yet. Maybe the stranger is coming back to get me. Panicking, I ran inside and fetched my 9mm. If that creep so much as entered the store, I'll blow his freaking brains out. I've got no time for this. My hands were trembling. This residue had forged itself onto the gun, and now its handle was sticky and gross. This was hideous stuff that I was dealing with. I couldn't get rid of it. The smell was so putrid that the entire cubbyhole that I worked in reeked to high heaven. And worse, the smell was intensifying with each passing second. The vehicle pulled in. To my relief, it wasn't the black Monte Carlo SS. It was a hippie van covered in fish and Grateful Dead stickers. I sighed. Talk about non-threatening. An attractive woman with blonde dreadlocks stepped out. She stretched, filled her tank, and then entered the shop. She smelled of cannabis and patchouli, a vast improvement from the foul odor perpetuating in the shop. To this, I was grateful. "Got any soap in here?" she asked upon entering. She was wearing a handmade dress underneath her brown suede jacket. "I've got this stuff all over me from the pump. You really gotta do something about that, you know." She was clearly upset by all the stuff on her hands, and I didn't blame her. I shook my head and then I pointed to the restrooms, which smelled as bad as the gunk we were covered with. She frowned, ordered a pack of zigzag whites, and then split. I looked at the time. 6:45 a.m., almost time to go. Casper Malik, the morning guy, also the owner of the JJ's gas station, should arrive any minute. This was a relief. I did a quick inventory, then tried again to wash whatever it was from my hands. And that's when I noticed the red spots. Both my hands were covered in large red welts. That's odd, I thought. I scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed and eventually removed the greasy substance from my hands. I'll have to toss my clothes straight into the washer when I get home. That is, if it's not too late to salvage them. They were nearly disintegrated. I didn't go near the palms. The drive home was difficult at best. It took immeasurable effort to hold onto the steering wheel of my F-150. The pain was insufferable. Blood was leaking from my fingernails, staining the steering wheel, which made me furious. I love my truck. Seeing how it's a 25-minute drive to the hospital on a good day, and I was too tired to bother. I simply retired to the comfort of my bed at the moment that I got home. Probably when I wake up, my hands would be fine. So I slept. I arose sometime afternoon, feeling miserable and underslept. I stumbled to the bathroom to pee. When I reached for my you-know-what, I almost leapt out of my skin. My hands were skeletons. Most of my skin and everything was gone, rendering them pink and useless. Only a thin layer of translucent skin remained. The rest was a bone. And the pain was egregious. I ended up peeing all over my floor. Not a good way to start the day. I was hungry, ravenous, so I went to work making bacon and eggs, but I gave up soon thereafter. I was in too much discomfort. "That's it," I said aloud. "If I can't make bacon and eggs, then I must be in rough shape." Reluctantly, and with a million razor blades scratching at my fingers, I found my coat, my wallet, and my keys. Every movement hurt more than the last. The remaining skin continued to peel off my hands, leaving tiny flakes on whatever I touched as evidence. Since it was impossible for me to drive, I went for my whiskey. After painfully opening the bottle and tossing 3 good shots down my throat, I called 911. This was an all-time low. I pictured Charlene, my dead wife, rolling her eyes and pointing her finger at me as she gave me the appropriate advice. A wave of sorrow fell upon me. Truly, I could use their wisdom and patience right about now. I was a mess. The ambulance arrived. They took one look at me, recoiled, and then sped me straight to the emergency room, where I was immediately escorted into a small white room with cold steel instruments that I imagined would cause me more misery. I was correct. A male nurse rushed in. He had put some cream on my disparaged hands and then applied a bandage. I screamed during the entire process. More nurses arrived. They were dressed in what looked to be like spacesuits. I felt like a leper. Maybe I was one. By the time a qualified doctor was able to see me, I had no skin left on either of my hands. I couldn't stop screaming. After being poked and prodded and tested and tormented, I passed out. They probably dosed me with something. I woke up sometime later in a hospital bed, wearing nothing but a blue gown. Both my hands were missing. This must be a mistake, I told myself in a fit of panic. I flailed around, flapping my arms like a bird, even though they still felt attached. This was a terrible and peculiar sensation, to say the least. Reluctantly, I stared at my body in shock and disbelief. My hands were nothing more than 2 stumps. My arms were inflamed and constantly itchy, and the pain was unbearable. I started shrieking and convulsing and soon went into shock. They gave me some medication which worked to calm my mind, but I was still upset, as you can imagine. There goes my employment, I remember thinking. And then a more serious question arose. How the heck can I pleasure myself without any hands? It's a stupid question, I know, but still. If you were in my shoes, maybe you would understand. After answering a plethora of questions by doctors and police officers alike, all of which I had no answer to, because I refused to speak of the stranger driving the black Monte Carlo SS, I was released, and I was told to see a specialist the following day. As I was leaving the hospital, I bumped into the hippie chick. Both of her hands were bloody stumps. I was staring at my shoes as we passed. When she saw me, she freaked out and started shouting accusations at me. Her bandages weren't in the best shape either. I couldn't leave soon enough. 2 weeks had passed since then. These specialists prescribed strong painkillers which don't work, and set up a series of in-home appointments which are proving to be useless. I'm a shell of my former self. I no longer have a job, of course, but that's only a side note. Both of my arms are gone. And worse, whatever I'm infected with is spreading faster than a bad idea. Soon I'm told that it'll attack my neck and shoulders, along with my heart and lungs and other vital organs, and there will be nothing left of me. I'm dissolving. I sure hope that I go fast because I'm in constant agony. I need 24 hours supervision, and my money is dwindling faster than my own body. You may have seen my story on the news. They've dubbed me the Incredible Shrinking Man. It's cute, I know. I wish the press would leave me be. But you know what they say about wishes. I've received little to no encouragement from any of the doctors or the other specialists, but I have been trained to run my computer solely by the sound of my voice. That's how I'm dictating this story. What a time to be alive, am I right? It doesn't matter really. because they'll be moving me to an isolated government facility by the end of this week. They want to administer a series of tests on me. Lucky me, right? So, this is a warning. If you're anywhere in the state of Colorado, and you happen to come across a black Monte Carlo SS, get away as fast as you can. Unless, of course, you want to end up like me, which I can assure you that you don't. I'm knocking on death's door. Doctors say that there'll be nothing left of me by Christmas, which is a-okay with me. Looks like I'll be spending Christmas with my Charlene this year. Thank God for small miracles.